Hello, this is Mr. Atherall. I'm just going to talk a little bit about Act 3 of Macbeth. I've done a couple of other videos on Act 1 and Act 2, so if you want to watch them in order, go back and watch Act 1 and Act 2 videos first. But I'm going to talk about Act 3, which is where Macbeth starts to change a little bit from the obedient, nervous killer who just follows what his wife says to taking control of his own destiny a little bit more and initiating the murders himself. So, Act 3, Scene 1, we start with Banquo's suspicion. So Banquo is suspicious of Macbeth, and he's suspicious of Macbeth because he heard the witch's prophecies, and even when he heard those prophecies, he thought that they might lead Macbeth into doing something he shouldn't have done. So now he's chatting about his suspicions. And so right at the beginning of Act 3, Scene 1, he says, "Thou hast it now, King Cawdor Glamis." He's talking about Macbeth as the weird women promised, the witches promised, "and I fear thou playest most foully for it." So remember that fair is foul and foul is fair. Again, Banquo is using the words that the witches first used, which foreshadow the whole of the play, that fair becomes foul and foul becomes fair. And Macbeth, as a fair man to start with, someone who fought bravely in the battles for King Duncan, has now become a foul man. And Banquo is echoing that sentiment when he says, "Thou playest most foully for it. Thou playest as the witches encouraged you to play." Then Macbeth turns up, and Banquo and Macbeth have a little chat together. Macbeth's asking him, are you going riding? Are you going to come to the feast tonight? And he's figuring out where Banquo is going, and our suspicions about why he needs to know that are kind of put inside us as the audience. And then Banquo goes off, and we see Macbeth organising the murder of Banquo and Fleance, although Fleance doesn't actually get murdered, Fleance gets away, but organising those murders and hiring assassins. Now, this is very, very different. This marks a big change in Macbeth, because Macbeth initially felt really guilty, didn't want to murder King Duncan, couldn't handle the guilt that he felt, and needed a lot of persuasion from his wife. Now, he's just going through it on his own and going out and organising Banquo's murder, so that he can be free from suspicion. Banquo is meant to be a character who is like the King of England at the time that Macbeth was on stage, meant to be from the same Stuart line as him. So the idea is that Banquo is a version of King James. Now, Banquo is a good, honest, fair man, and the cautionary tale, the context here is that don't mess with what God has put in place. Don't mess with the king, because bad things will come of it. We're about to see Banquo get killed, but bad things come of that to Macbeth as a result. So, Act 3, Scene 2, we know that that's been set in motion, and we've got Lady Macbeth and Macbeth having a chat. And now this time, this again shows the change in Macbeth. He is in a state of anguish, in a state of mental anguish about what's going on. His anguish might be guilt, but it's becoming more paranoia and fear and not knowing what's going to happen and being out of control. He says, "Full of scorpions is my mind, dear wife." An excellent metaphor to zoom in on. Scorpions we relate as being aggressive, harmful. His mind is full of them. There's kind of aggressive pain. He's turned against himself here. His own mind is in turmoil because he's gone against what he knows is to be right. But he also says to his wife, "Be innocent of knowledge, dearest Chuck." You don't need to know what I've done. You don't need to know what's happened. Now, she's far from innocent. But here Macbeth is taking control. You don't need to know what I have sorted out. So that's a great quote to show the shift in their relationship back to Macbeth taking control away from his wife and him initiating the murders. Act 3, Scene 3 is the murder of Banquo. We've got a little bit of pathetic fallacy, a little bit of rain. Banquo says, "It will rain tonight." As he gets killed, he says, "Oh, treachery, fly, good Fleance, fly." Again, this recognition of truth. He knows that he's been killed by Macbeth, and he cares for his son, wants him to escape from the murder. Act 3, Scene 4, we go back to Lady Macbeth and Macbeth. They've now got a banquet that people are arriving at. The murderer comes along and tells Macbeth, this is what we've done. We've done half a job. We've managed to kill Banquo, but we haven't managed to kill Fleance. And then at this banquet, Banquo's ghost turns up. Macbeth, his mind is all over the place. He is not coping with reality. Again, this is part of the cautionary tale. If you do something terrible, if you commit a murder, then guilt will plague you. He says to the ghost of Banquo, thy blood is cold, you're meant to be dead, hence horrible shadow, unreal mockery, hence leave me, horrible shadow. He's haunted by what he's done. Lady Macbeth tries to calm the situation down, speaks to him, tries to get everything sorted, and then Macbeth says something really interesting because it tells us where he's going to go in terms of his character from this point forth. So he says, strange things I have in my head. My head's playing tricks with me. Mentally, I can't cope with what I've done. Come, we'll sleep, let's try and get rid of this. My strange and self-abuse is the initiate fear that wants hard use. Sounds kind of complicated. Initiate is the initial, the first fear. When I've committed evil, killed Duncan, killed Banquo, I'm fearful. I'm fearful of consequence. I'm fearful of what's going to happen. I'm fearful about my own life. I'm fearful of getting found out. Perhaps partly guilt as well. I feel a guilt, but it's the initiate fear that wants hard use. If I hard use it, what he's saying is, if I do it a lot, then I'll stop feeling this fear, this uncomfortableness. If I keep murdering, I will rid myself of my conscience. And that is what happens to Macbeth. He gets himself to a point where he's committed so much wrong that he just doesn't feel it anymore. He doesn't feel his emotions anymore. He describes the things he's done as self-abuse. He's self-abusing himself. Killing other people is abusing himself because of the pain it causes him in his head. Evil has consequences within our own mind. A little bit like the Scorpions quote. We are affected mentally by what we've done. So it's a really good quote. My strange and self-abuse is the initiate fear that wants hard use. Act 3, Scene 5, we've got the witches again. They're having a little chat. Very, very short scene, not necessarily one that we need to pay lots of attention to. Act 3, Scene 6, we've got Lennox and talking about the fact that Banquo walked too late and Fleance didn't turn up at the feast. I hear Macduff lives in disgrace. Everyone is being kind of cast away. Macbeth is isolating himself. And then Act 3, Scene 7, there is no Act 3, Scene 7. We're into Act 4, and I'll make another video for that. So I hope that's been useful. Hopefully those quotes, particularly remembering this changing moment, the way that Macbeth changes from one type of person to another, is going to be really helpful for you as you prepare to take this exam.